Hi, originally this was 4 separate videos, but then I decided it would be a good idea to bring them all together and just to give you a complete guide to completing the square. So please do download the worksheet, have a go at each of the questions, compare your solutions. If you need any help, always leave a comment, I'll always come back to you. I'll look forward to seeing you inside the kind of very long video. Sorry about that.
Hi, so as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm going to work through the whole of this worksheet. Please do download the worksheet from 3minutemaths.co.uk and then you should be able to follow along. Please do have a go at each of the questions and compare your solutions. Okay, so the general principle is pretty much the same for all completing the square, in that what we do is we write our first two terms as x minus 3 squared. Now basically it's half of this minus 6x value. Okay, now the reason we do that is, remember that we're writing exactly the same equation, but we're writing it in a different form. So if I just expand that for a minute, what I get is the first two terms of x squared minus 6x, which is perfectly fine and exactly what I've got in my original question. The problem I've got is I've now got a plus 9 that I need to deal with, so therefore I have to minus 9 from this calculation, or the way that I'm going to write it out. And then I also have this plus 1, which is the constant that I need to deal with as well. So if I tidy this up, I'm going to get x minus 3 squared, and minus 9 plus 1 is minus 8, and actually that's the answer to the question. Now the advantage with completing the square is that it allows us to write straight away the coordinates of the turning point, and all I do is I do the opposite to minus 3, which is going to be positive 3, is going to be the x coordinate, and then this will be the y coordinate of minus 8. So the turning point for this is going to be 3 minus 8. Okay, let's have a look then at question number 2. Very similar in its approach, and I'm going to work through these at a relatively good pace, so please do stop and have a go at each of the questions. So as I work it through, I've got x plus 5. Now I'm going to expand that in the corner here. X plus 5 multiplied by x plus 5. Well, I'm fine with x squared plus 10x. My problem is I've got this 25 at the end I have to deal with, so therefore I'm going to minus 25, and then I've also got this constant of plus 8. Okay, when I tidy that up a little bit, I'm going to get x plus 5 squared, and minus 25 plus 8 is going to be minus 17, and therefore the turning point is going to be minus 5. Remember, I need to do the opposite, and then minus 17, and that would be the answer to question number 2. So hopefully you're getting the idea with these, and the same will apply when we've got a fraction to deal with. So this is question number 3. Now you have to be a little bit more careful with fractions, but I'm going to follow the same principle. So I'm going to write this as x plus, and rather than writing 3 divided by 2 or 1.5x, I'm actually going to write it as a fraction of 3 over 2, and then I'm going to square that. Now that just makes my life a little bit easier, because when I'm working with fractions, if I want to multiply them out, it just is a little bit more simpler than using 1.5 times 1.5. So this is going to give me x squared, and then I'm going to get plus 6 over 2x. Now you've got to remember that that's 3x, so I haven't changed anything from my original equation. And then finally I've got plus 9 over 4, and it's the plus 9 over 4 I need to get rid of, so I'm going to minus 9 over 4, and then I've also got to remember my constant of minus 7. Okay, now essentially at the end there I've got two fractions I've got to deal with, so I'm going to write this as x plus 3 over 2 squared, and I've got minus 9 over 4, but rather than writing minus 7, I'm going to write minus 28 over 4, because then that allows me to subtract the two fractions from each other, and my final answer will be x plus 3 over 2 squared minus 9 minus 28 is going to be minus 37 over 4. Okay, hopefully that's okay for you, and therefore it allows me to write my turning point is going to be, remember, it's going to be the negative 3 over 2, and then I leave my y coordinate as minus 37 over 4. Now if I wanted to, I could convert that to a decimal. It's perfectly fine to do that. Some people prefer working in decimals, so I could put on here or, and I'm going to put minus 1.5, and then that would be minus 9.25. Okay, so it doesn't really matter which way around you do it, providing you're happy to either work in decimals or fractions. Okay, so let's move on then to question number 4. So again, we're going to follow exactly the same principle. This is pretty much the same. X minus 1 squared, I'm going to do x minus 1 multiplied by x minus 1. So I'm going to get x squared minus 2x, and then my final problem is this plus 1, so I'm going to minus 1. Then I've got to deal with my constant of minus 6. So tie that up, I'm going to get x minus 1 squared. Minus 1 minus 6 is going to be minus 7. So a fairly easy one there. The coordinates of the turning point will be positive 1. Remember, I do the opposite, positive 1, and then minus 7, and that would be the answer to question number 4. Okay, so hopefully you're getting the idea here. So let's move on then to question number 5. And again, much the same principle. So the only difference with this is I'm going to actually just explain what we mean by the turning points and that sort of thing. So okay, I know it's minus 25. The reason I know it's minus 25 is because I've got x plus 5 multiplied by x plus 5, so I'm going to get x squared minus 10x plus 25, so therefore I have to put minus 25, and then the constant is minus 8. So what that's going to give me is x plus 5 squared minus 25 minus 8 is going to be minus 33. So therefore the turning point, which is actually asking me in the question this time, the turning point is going to equal minus 5. Remember, I need to make it the opposite sign, and then minus 33. And basically what we're getting at, if I just very quickly sort of talk about this, is that effectively if I plotted this on an XY graph, I would have something like this. It's not a great drawing, but basically this is the turning point, which is going to be minus 5 minus 33, and then it actually crosses the y-axis there at minus 8. Okay, so that's actually what we're getting at, and the way we can do this with completing the square just makes our analysis of quadratic equations just a little bit easier. Okay, so we'll just go on then to finally question number 6 on these types of questions. So again, I'm going to write x minus 3 squared. Okay, if I do this in the corner here, I've got x minus 3 multiplied by x minus 3. Hopefully you're getting the idea now. It's very important actually to work out all the steps. I tend very much to write all the steps down, even if my own studies and the way I do things, I was always taught to write everything down. So the turning point is going to be equal to positive 3 and minus 7. So you should be able to do these fairly quickly, providing you've had a little bit of experience, a little bit of working through, and they're a fairly straightforward 3 marks. Okay, so let's move on then to working a few more with fractions. So again, apologies for the length of this particular video. At this point I had stopped it, but then I figured that it would be better to do a complete guide to completing the square. So we're going to do exactly the same principle. I'm going to get x, and rather than writing 2.5, I'm going to write it as 5 over 2, and that's going to be squared. Okay, so if I just do this in the side here, I've got x minus 5 over 2 multiplied by x minus 5 over 2, so that's going to give me x squared minus 10 over 2x, and don't forget that's 5 x, so that's perfectly fine. It's exactly the same as my original equation, but then unfortunately I've got this 25 over 4 which I need to deal with, so I'm going to take this away, Okay, and I'm just going to cut a quick step here, because rather than writing plus 1, I'm going to write plus 4 over 4, which is exactly the same as plus 1. It just means then my calculation has just skipped a step, but it becomes a little bit easier for the purposes of the video. So I'll end up as minus 21 over 4. So therefore my turning point is going to equal 5 over 2. Remember, it's a positive 5 over 2, and that's minus 21 over 4. If you prefer, and again, you know, it's no issue at all, if you prefer to work with decimals, that should work out as 2.5 and then minus 5.25, and that should be the answer to that particular question. Okay, so working with fractions, providing you're okay with working with fractions, then it should again be relatively straightforward to work through. Let's move on then to question number 8, and again slightly more challenging, I guess, but if we look at that 0.5x, I'm going to write that as a half x, because it makes my life easier, because I know a half of a half is going to be a quarter. So therefore I've got x plus 1/4 squared. Okay, so again let's go off and do that in the corner. So x plus 1/4 multiplied by x plus 1/4, well, that's going to give me x squared, and that's going to give me plus 2 over 4x, which is exactly the same as a half, or 0.5, so that's fine. And then I've got this plus 1/16 that I need to deal with, so I'm going to have minus 1/16 written here. Okay, and then I've also got this positive 7. Now again, you'll need to do a bit of a calculation, but basically positive 7 is exactly the same as saying 112/16. Okay, all you would do is multiply 7 by 16 and then write it over 16. So therefore that calculation now is all in fractions, makes it a little bit easier for me, and I end up with plus 111 over 16, which seems like a fairly awkward fraction, but basically it allows me to write my turning point as minus 1/4. Again, don't forget it has to be the opposite, and then my y coordinate is 111 over 16. If you prefer to work as decimals, that would work out as minus 0.25, and then 111 over 16 is 6.9375. So it's entirely up to you which way round you prefer to work. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some experience and some idea of working through these types of fractional type completing the square. Let's move on then now to a more kind of, I suppose, practical type question which you're going to come across. Okay, and it says a rectangle is that, those sides, the area is that. So I wouldn't worry too much about showing that at the moment. Effectively what we're saying is that x multiplied by 2x plus 4 is going to equal 30, and what we've got to do is take that, change it into a quadratic equation, and then complete the square. Okay, hopefully you'll see what I mean in a minute. So as I multiply that out, I'm going to get 2x squared plus 4x equals 30. If I bring the 30 over, because don't forget when I'm factorising I need to make sure that it all equals 0, so plus 4x minus 30 equals 0. Now you'll notice that each of the coefficients is divisible by 2, so actually they made it very kind to us. I've got x squared plus 2x minus 15 equals 0, and that's the equation, if you like, of the rectangle's area. Okay, now to complete the square from that, I'm just going to do that very quickly. I should get x plus 1, okay, squared. Now I don't want to sort of keep writing out the same thing, but x plus 1 multiplied by x plus 1 means that then I've got a minus 1 to deal with, and also then I've got minus 15. So remember what I'm doing is I'm actually changing the form of the quadratic equation into its completed square form, which is going to be x plus 1 squared minus 16 equals 0. If you're not sure about what I've done to achieve this bit of it, then please do go back to the previous videos. Okay, hopefully that's all right for you. Now it says hence or otherwise find the perimeter of the rectangle. So I'm going to show you two ways of doing that. Either we can use basically the quadratic equation 1, or we can use the completed square form 2. So I'm just going to see if I can write these here. So the quadratic equation 1, and this is one way of doing it, is what we're going to do is we're going to find x by factorising, okay, or the completed square form, which is 2, which is going to be x plus 1 squared minus 16 equals 0. And we're going to get the same result for both of them. Okay, so the first one is I can factorise this to x plus 5 multiplied by x minus 3, and hopefully you can do that also. That's equal to 0, so therefore I've got two values of x. They're either x equals minus 5 or x equals 3. Okay, now if you go back to the original sketch, what we've got is a rectangle where this is x and this is 2x plus 4. Okay, so if I feed the value of x equals 3, now it has to be x equals 3 because it's a positive number, it has to be a positive value, therefore it means that the short edge is going to be 3 and the long edge is going to be 10, so therefore the perimeter, when I add all of that up, is going to be 26 centimeters. So that's one way of doing it, and that works perfectly well. The other way of doing it is to actually solve the completed square form. So if I make this as x plus 1 squared equals 16, I can then square root both sides and I get x plus 1 equals the square root of 16. Now you have to remember the square root of 16 is going to be positive or negative, and actually it's going to be equal to 4. So I can write this as x plus 1 equals plus or minus 4. Okay, now I'm going to take that plus 1 over to the other side. I'm going to get my value of x's as x equals 1 plus 4, sorry, minus 1 plus 4, or minus 1 minus 4. So again, I get exactly the same result as I did when I factorise, is that x is either going to equal to 3 or is going to equal to minus 5. Okay, it needs to be the x equals 3 value, and when I plug that into the values of the perimeter of the rectangle, guess what? Again, I'm going to get 26. So it doesn't really matter which way around you do it. Usually, I would say with these sorts of questions, the completed square form is actually the easier one to deal with because you've kind of done all the work anyway. Okay, so the final section here is going to be dealing with the third section here is going to be dealing with where we've got a coefficient of x squared. So the problem with this one is we've got this 2x squared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out completely from the calculations. I'm going to use some big square brackets. So I'm going to get x squared minus 6x plus 12. Okay, so all I've done is I've factorised for 2. Now if I factorise for 2, it allows me then to look at the middle part of it, x squared minus 6x plus 12, and then work out its completed square form. So I've got 2, and then I'm going to have x minus 3 squared. Okay, and again, as I did before, I'm going to write x minus 3 multiplied by x minus 3. So I'm going to get x squared minus 6x plus 9, and it's the minus 9, therefore I've got to put in and also plus 12. Now don't forget big square brackets. Okay, so in its completed square form, I've got x minus 3 squared, and then I've got minus 9 plus 12 is going to be positive 3. Okay, and then the final part of this is actually removing the square brackets. Now, however, if we go back to the question, I can actually leave the first part exactly the same, because if I multiply 2 times x minus 3 squared, I get 2 times x minus 3 squared, but then I also have to multiply the 2 times the positive 3, which is going to be plus 6, and actually That's the answer to the question. Okay, so hopefully that's all right for you. Now, the fact you've got a 2 there doesn't actually affect the turning point. The turning point itself will stay exactly as we did it before. We've got to remember that -3, this one here, has to become a positive, so it's going to be 3 and then 6 for the y coordinate, and that would be the turning point. Okay, hopefully that's okay for you. Let's move on then to question number 11, and again we're going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to take 2 out, big square brackets, and I'm going to write x squared plus 4x plus 5, and it's the middle bit that I'm interested in dealing with, so therefore in its completed square form I can work that out as x plus 2 squared. So again, just off at the side there, I do x plus 2 multiplied by x plus 2. That's going to give me x squared plus 4x, which is fine. This bit is the same as that. That's absolutely fine. However, I've got a plus 4 I've got to get rid of, so I'm going to minus 4, and then I've got my plus 5 from my original equation at the top there. Close my square brackets. Okay, so let's have a look at tidying that up a little bit. I'm going to have 2, and I've got x plus 2 squared minus 4 plus 5 is going to be plus 1. Okay, close my square brackets. Okay, so now I'm in a position where I'm going to get rid of my square brackets and write it in the form I'm being asked to. So 2 times x plus 2 squared is going to say as 2 times x plus 2 squared, but then don't forget that 2 multiplies the plus 1, so I get plus 2, and that's the answer to my question. And actually it allows me again then just to straightforward write out the coordinates of the turning point, which is going to be the plus 2 becomes a negative, so it's going to be minus 2 and then 2 for the y coordinate, and that would be the turning point. Okay, hopefully that's all right for you. So we're going to move on a little bit now to to question number 12. Okay, so question number 12, again exactly the same principle, but the difficulty with this one is that we've got to take 3 out and we're going to end up with a bit of a fraction problem. But if I take 3, make my big brackets, I'm going to get x squared plus 2x, and then I have, rather than minus 8, I've got minus 8 over 3. Oops, not great. Okay, and then I'm going to close my big square brackets. Okay, so the middle bit is the bit that I'm interested in. So I'm going to start my first bit of completing the square. I get x plus 1 squared. So I'm going to write x plus 1 multiplied by x plus 1 at the side here. I'm going to get x squared plus 2x. That's perfectly fine, I'm happy with that, but I have this plus 1 at the end, so I need to minus 1, and then also I need to minus 8 over 3, which is the final bit of my original equation. Okay, so let's tidy that up a little bit. So what I'll do just for the purposes of this video is I'm going to say, well, actually that minus 1, I'm going to change that to minus 3 over 3, because then it allows me to just go ahead and do my calculation. So I'm going to have 3 big square brackets x plus 1 squared, and I've got minus 3 over 3 minus 8 over 3 is minus 11 over 3, and close my brackets. Okay, get rid of the square brackets, and I'm going to have my completed form as 3 x plus 1 squared, so that's multiplied by that. I'm going to leave it as it is, and then 3 times minus 11 over 3 is going to be minus 11, I beg your pardon, minus 11. Okay, so the denominator and the numerator cancel themselves out, and that would be the answer to that particular question. It also then allows me to write the turning points of the graph, which is going to be minus 1, remember I need to change it, and minus 11 for the y coordinate, and that's the answer to question number 12. Okay, so same principle then with question number 13. Might be good now for you to stop this video, have a go at these questions, and then compare your solutions. Okay, so the first one is I'm going to take 4 out. Okay, it looks like again I've got a fraction I need to deal with, so that's going to be x squared minus 2x, and rather than minus 7, it's going to be minus 7 over 4. Okay, and it is the middle bit I'm only interested in completing the square. Okay, so I'm going to write that as x minus 1 squared. Off to the side, I'm going to have x minus 1 multiplied by x minus 1. That's going to give me x squared minus 2x. Perfectly fine, I'm happy with that, but I've got this plus 1 at the end, which I need to get rid of, so minus 1. And then I've got minus 7 over 4 from my original equation. Okay, however, I'm going to do what I did before, is rather than writing minus 1, I'm going to swap that and I'm going to change it to minus 4 over 4, because that will make my calculations much easier. Okay, so I end up with 4 big brackets x minus 1 squared minus 4 over 4 minus 7 over 4 is minus 11 over 4. Okay, and oops, sorry, that's not a very good bracket, was it? So I'll change that to a square bracket again, sorry. Okay, all right, and then when I expand out, I've got 4 times x minus 1 squared, leaving that as it is, that's perfectly fine. And then I've got 4 times minus 11 over 4, well again, actually that's going to be minus 11. Okay, because the 4 multiplied by divided by 4 is going to cancel themselves out, so I end up with just minus 11. Okay, turning points, well, hopefully you should be okay with this now. It's just simply going to be 1 and minus 11, and that would be the answer to that particular question. Okay, so we're on the final straight. We've got 2 more questions to go, question number 15 and 16, which is where really completing the square perhaps has more of a value in some ways, in that it allows us also to solve some fairly complex quadratic equations. You could use, of course, the quadratic formula to do this, but completing the square is kind of quicker and a bit more straightforward. I will mention this would be on a non-calculator paper, so this is non-calc, both of these questions. Okay, so the first one is I need to make it equal to 0, so I'm going to write that as x squared minus 22x plus 5 equals 0. And then I'm going to complete the square. I'm going to get x minus 11 squared, pop that into a corner somewhere, x minus 11 multiplied by x minus 11, well, that's going to give me x squared minus 22x. Now I've got fine with that, but I've got this plus 121 I've got to deal with, so it's going to be minus 121 and then plus my 5 constant from before. Okay, so I'm going to write that as x minus 11 squared minus 121 plus 5 is going to be minus 116 equals 0. So then really we're in a position to solve it, because what I can do is make x the subject of this particular formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that minus 116 to the other side. So I've got x minus 11 squared equals 116. I'm now going to square root both sides. So if I do that, I get x minus 11 equals the square root of 116, and don't forget that would be plus or minus. Okay, so I'm in a position now that I can write my value of x is going to be equal to, if I bring that minus 11 over, x is going to equal to 11 plus the root of 116, or x is going to be 11 minus the root of 116, and that is actually the answer to the question. The only thing I would note with you, and I don't think you'd be penalised for this on this particular type of question, is that 116 can actually be written as 2 root 29, because it's actually 4 times 29. So you could, if you work this out with a calculator or on the quadratic formula, you might get an answer of 2 root 29 or 11 minus 2 root 29. It's exactly the same. Okay, hopefully that's okay for you and you would get your 5 marks. There's not a lot of working, providing you understand the basic principles, then actually you shouldn't have to do too much to get those 5 marks. Question number 15 is a little bit more problematic because we've got a fraction in there, but we're going to treat it in exactly the same way as we always have done. So we've got x plus 5 over 2 squared. Again, off to the corner I've got x plus 5 over 2 multiplied by x plus 5 over 2. So that's going to give us x squared plus 10 over 2x. Well, that's fine by me because that's 5x. That's perfectly good. But then unfortunately, I've got this 25 over 4 at the end that I need to deal with. So I'm going to minus 25 over 4. And then I've actually got to add 17 over 4 from my original. Okay, so they've been very kind to us. They've given it as 17 over 4, which is actually going to work quite well for us. So I've got x plus 5 over 2 squared minus 25 over 4 plus 17 over 4 is going to give us minus 8 over 4 equals 0. Okay, let's tidy that up a little bit. Now you'll note that 8 over 4 is actually 2. So once again, I can get rid of that and I can write it, if I want to, as being minus 2. Okay, and that just makes my life a little bit easier for me. Okay, so let's have a look at rewriting that to get the value of x as the subject. Okay, so x equals positive 2. Going to square root it, so I'm going to get x plus 5 over 2 equals the square root of 2, not forgetting it's plus or minus. Okay, so therefore I've got two values. I've got x equals minus 5 over 2 plus root 2, or x equals minus 5 over 2 minus root 2. And that actually is the answer to the final question on this particular worksheet. If you've got this far in the worksheet, you've done fantastically well, and thank you for sticking with it for this length of time. It's one of the longest videos I think I've ever done. Okay, hope it's been useful to you, and I look forward to seeing you inside the next video.
Okay, so I hope the video has been useful. If you're not sure about anything, always add a comment. I'll come back to you. Subscribe to the channel. I produce videos on a very regular basis, and I'll look forward to seeing you inside the next video.